Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening and welcome to this seminar, Discover the Law of Life. Can you believe we're in the middle of this seminar? Actually, we just passed the halfway of this seminar. So, I think it's meeting number 5, if I'm counting them correctly, which should be right in the middle of our series of meetings. And you are the faithful ones, those that are really interested to know why do we get sick. We are so excited to have Dr. Mueller with us again tonight. And I am just repeating the same announcements every night. If you didn't take the set of those 3 DVDs, well, they are still available for you for a donation of any amount. And also, Dr. Mueller is willing to see you privately if this is what you want. Make sure that you schedule your appointment with him as soon as possible. There are only a couple of days left, so he will leave this area, unfortunately. Okay, well, as every night we are blessed here with some musical selections, and tonight we have again these 2 famous violinists and pianists blessing us tonight. Let's just listen to them. Thank you.
have something that from time to time may have the purpose to create some bridges among us. And I just went to the car and I came back, and here I have a CD with 18 songs, violin and piano, played with my wife and recorded to a professional TV station some years ago. So I'm ready to give this to anyone tonight, just to make it to feel that you have a secondary purpose to be here as well. And I'm looking for a reason to do that. If I'm asking you how many have been coming faithfully every single night, 5 nights, that may be 3 or 4, 5, 6 people, and I have only 1, so it's hard to do that. And some of you may be watching online, which counts as well. Who came from the farther distance? I don't know who came from. Anybody coming here from 50 miles? No? No, that's didn't talk. Let me put it that. Whom have a birthday close to today date, which is October 18, 2018. So anybody having a close birthday? Maybe today, yesterday, tomorrow, or the closest one. Let's try. Anybody born in October? Here? No? How about September? I have 1, 2 September and 3 September. How about November, because it's closer. November. Anybody in November? If we have 1 in November, that's the winner. Because you are. Let's go back to September. We have 1, 2, 3. What day?
September the 18th.
18th. So exactly a month ago. 6. 12. I see here. You are not in September? October? What day? 27. Come here. Actually, come here. You are the winner. Sorry. Sorry, Miss E, you are next in line.
Tomorrow night.
But was he here all the time?
Okay, sure. Doctor?
Good evening. So let's continue to not get too late tonight, so that we might get a good understanding. We repeat that what I say every first night. We must have the law as a measurement. We must know the law. And we must prove through experiment that the law is correct. We have 4 things that are unchangeable: the law, the structure, the power that we need, and the function. And having and knowing those things, it is we have a very basic foundation so that we do not get into confusion. Now, tonight I would like to give a whole overview of the human being so that we know the structure, at least from an overview way. There is much more to say, but at least to know where it begins and where it ends, we see. It's in our disease, it's in the function of our body. So, let's start from there where human started. Human was created out of 2 elements, and when they both came together, the earth and the breath of life from God, the human became a living soul, or those 2 elements became a living soul, and in the living soul, the breath of life became a spirit, and the earth that was until then just atoms now becomes a very complex body with many, many things that have to work together in harmony. Now, God made both of them dependent. The spirit He made dependent of love, righteousness, truth, freedom, security, peace, well-being, knowledge, happiness.
the body He made dependent on the electrical current so that it was working, and He made the body dependent on chemistry and that we know food, water, and oxygen. Now, God gave the human, through the law, the whole responsibility to fulfill both needs. So He put there the sources, and the one source for the body is nature for the oxygen. But the other source for the spirit is God. But by the way the spirit is fulfilled, He also makes the electrical current so that the body can function well. So there is the connection between the mind or the spirit and the body, that the body cannot function without the spirit, because the spirit gives him the power. And of course, the spirit needs the body so that he can see, hear, and all this. We have seen that. And everything must work and must satisfy its need according to the law. I must take from the source and give it further on. Now, I was asked a few times about what spirit do I speak. Now, sometimes for me the words are very used because I speak this now for over 10 years. So then, for me it's clear what the spirit is. So I hope from a very simple, diagram here, we understand the spirit is a spiritual entity that we inherit as well as our body from Adam. Because God created one man, and out of one man we are all. So in Adam we were all existed. When I ask sometimes, when were you created? Some people say, 20 years ago when I was born plus 9 months. That's not the truth. We all come from Adam. And we all have the body and the spirit of Adam. That is by inheritance. It is our human spirit. We live by these two elements which give the soul. We do not come from a dead person, we come from a live person. But we are an individual that exists when we are made together in our mother's womb. So when we speak about the human body, we all understand that's it's not our possession, we learn that, but it's our body that we use, and the spirit is our mind by which we work. And both must be satisfied from the sources set by the Creator. And He set Himself as the source for the spirit, and He set nature for food, so that we all can be satisfied, and we should satisfy our needs. Now, once again, the major differences between the body and the spirit. We saw that the spirit only can act for himself. The body obeys the commands of the spirit. The spirit cannot be forced to act. He always must act himself. In a spirit, there is no passivity. The spirit always acts himself. He must evaluate everything that comes to him. Nothing that comes into the body doesn't come to the spirit, and every event must evaluate, and we saw last night, he evaluates it between gain and loss, and what he sees as a gain, he's happy with, and what he sees as a loss, he must avoid and say no. But he is acting. The body can be forced to action, the spirit cannot. Only the spirit can think, see, feel, hear, taste, smell, and decide. The body has no spiritual capacities. It cannot feel, think, or decide. Only the spirit can move the body. The body has no moving in itself. It can never move itself. And only the spirit can have a relationship with God, humans, and animals, while the body can have no relationship, no capacity for relationships. Now, last night we saw that there is an error in the human spirit, not in the human body. Some people say the genes are the problem, but our genetic have no mind. The genes have no mind. The genes are never for anything guilty, because they are only instruments like this pen to do what someone else tells them to do. They have no life of their own. Genes, therefore, have no responsibility, and we cannot put the error that we have in our minds on our genetics. So, where does the error come from? What is he saying? He says, my spiritual needs are satisfied by what others are doing. They must be alive to do it. I must keep my dead people with me. I need to be loved, respected, honored, praised. Others are not allowed to do me wrong, lie, betray, beat, steal. I have to put boundaries to others. I judge and condemn them when they are doing the wrong, being convinced they did it to me. I have to control time, circumstances, money, goods, and the life of those around me. And the more power I have over others, the better I think my needs are fulfilled. So what must the error be that misleads us to this conclusion? It is the belief that I am God. If I would be a creature, I would have never any expectations. We'll see that very soon. And you can go with me, and I would ask you to do this exercise. You will see that every ideology that we find on earth, no matter where you go, if you study to find the root of it, where it comes from, it is the same. No matter if you're religious, you're a humanist, an atheist, an agnostic, a communist, a scientist, all have the idea, and when you prove all their ideas, that they must be God. At least when anyone says, you must love me. Well, I had one day a patient, he was over 40 years old, and he was very afraid when I just touched his ear to look into his ear. He jumped back. And I said, why are you so afraid? And he said, because my mom and my dad didn't love me. I almost started to laugh. I said, poor guy, you must be miserable. With 40 years, you need the love of your mommy? And the way you behave today, you think it's the result because they didn't love you? So you see, that's the deception. If you need to be loved, you must be God. Then someone owes you something. You never find one law in nature or one Bible verse in the Bible where it says that the neighbor has any duties towards you. But we will find through the whole Scripture that we have a duty towards our neighbors. Because that's the fulfilling of life. When we love, we are fulfilled. Not when we expect someone else to do it, because when others do it, they do it to God and they have the benefit of it. And I have my own experience. I will share it tomorrow night. The more I love my wife, the better I am. Amen. The more I love my mom, amen, the better I am. But those are not always easy to love. Because of who am I? Because I must judge. Are you worthy for my love? If I think that others are worthy or not worthy, I must be God. That's why look to all this, all ideologies. None you will find that has not the idea that they are right. Esteem himself higher than the other. They know better than the other. They are in competition. They are in contest. They struggle for power. They judge. They control. They are violent when their will is not fulfilled. And they go into war to murder. The same thing is with the religious ideas. So it doesn't matter in the end if we don't understand what the root of human problem is. It doesn't matter which religion you are. If at the root of it you still think you're God, your religion is worthless. It won't help you for nothing. Because when something happened, when your wife betrays you, or your child is killed, or whatever happens, you are going to die. You're going to suffer and you're going to destroy yourself without any choice. So we must understand that there is no thing in this earth that is at the bottom of all the problems except identity. Who am I? So let's see, if I would be a created being, if I am a creature, how would be the tree? We would have different nations, different skills, different skin colors, different clothes, different tastes, different sizes, different tasks. How would we be together? Everyone would esteem himself on the same level as others. The Bible even goes a step further. It says, esteem the other higher than yourself. So when we do that, we are free. But as long as we esteem ourselves higher than the others, we have a problem. So, no claim of knowing it better or have better abilities, no competition, no contest, no struggle for power, nobody judges the other, no one controls the other, no violence, no war, no murder. By the change of only one thing, that is, who am I? You see, in the heathen world, the gods fight it with each other. You remember? Why? If there would be more than one God, where would be the orientation? They must fight. But in the created world, there cannot be any fight because we are all creatures. So who will think he's higher than the other? If you are just a creature, there would be all these things done away with. Now we saw last night that we have a conscious and a subconscious, and in our will we have our needs, the physical and the spiritual ones, and in our hearts we take the decision where we have the plus and minus, where the electricity is made. We have seen that we have only two categories of choosing, that is gain or loss, and we must say yes to gain, and we must avoid loss by all means. What do you think is stronger, the yes or the no? By what can we manipulate people better, through the yes or through the no?
Yes. No. Probably no.
It's always the no that is stronger than the yes. You see, you can stay here, you must not necessarily win, but you must necessarily avoid loss. You see, when I was training as a resident, as an ENT, we did surgery at the sinuses. And when you do surgery in the sinuses, it's very dangerous. You can go beyond the border of the last bone and jump into the brain, which would not be so good. For whom? Well, no. It's for you. So that's why we had to train first on dead people. So we went there, people who were dying and in the hospital, and we did surgery on them so that to see, we got the frame, how to work, to see that we don't go beyond that last bone. But then you come through to real life when it bleeds out, and you know, and then you have to be very careful. Why am I careful? Because I want to save the life of the person or my reputation? Both? No. If I could go to the no, I could say, well, if I jump into, yes, one of my attendees, he was a very, very skilled surgeon. But you know, the more skilled you are, sometimes you're not paying so much attention. You see, when you go by one that is not so used, he's very careful. Yeah, he takes more time in surgery. But you know, those surgeons are good who are fast and good. And so when you want to be a good surgeon, you must be fast. And so Because the faster you are, the more surgery you get. And surgery is like an addiction. When you're a surgeon, you're addicted to it. And I was addicted to it. I loved surgery. You could stay the whole day in the OR and just, you know, it's very fantastic. Even if you don't eat, you don't drink, you're satisfied. You take off the gloves, you think you have done a great thing, and so on. Now, this my attendee, one day he just went beyond that, and he cut the artery that is just beyond our sphenoid sinus, and the blood was at the ceiling. Now, of course, that's why we are very careful. If we could lose, then the surgeon could say, well, if I cut out this, it doesn't matter. If we could lose, we would jump over the window and would say, no problem. If we could lose, you could never put any stoplight anywhere, because people could say, doesn't matter, I just go through. You know why you stop at the stoplight? Because you cannot lose. So we always live in this situation, and it's only then when we lose and when we take the loss personal, we get into trouble. But before the Spirit puts everything into gain and loss so that he can take a decision, he must know how to get to gain or loss. Is it to receiving or to giving? Is loss when I don't receive, or receive too little, or when something is taken away? Or is loss when I not give, or I keep what I took? So, it's always when it is personal loss. One day I had a patient, and he was 47 years old, 49, and he came to me from a hospital where they treat people with difficulties, with depression, with burnout syndrome. And he had for 5 years an issue with his left ear, for 5 years. And also before the issue of the ear began, he lost his sexual capacity. He's 44 years old. And so that was there. And I think he had another thing as well, but now came the burnout. Now you know, by what you have learned until now, why is this man sick? He lost something. Precious or not precious?
Precious.
Precious. The bigger the disease, the greater sometimes the loss. Now that is subjective. How one says how great his loss is for him is pure subjective. I saw people who were going through very difficult things, were abused terribly, and almost had nothing. And others were just a little bit abused, but they saw it as the world is the end, and they were very sick. So it's very subjective. It's very subjective how big I see something. But we all agree, is the loss of a child something expensive or precious or not precious? Yes. So this gentleman, who was a professor in biology, he said, I said to him, you must have something very heavy on your heart. That when a man loses his capacity for sexuality, there must be something that is deep in his mind that breaks him down, his body. And so I asked him, what happens to you? What was it? Now it was a short visit, I couldn't go like I do it when I have people who come from my closeness and they come back and come back, but he was only once with me. And so I said, what is it that breaks you, that makes you sick? And he said, 8 or 9 years ago, his little child, he said, I have 4 children, and we had the 3 at the beginning, and then there came one without expectation. It says she was a little angel. And she sold cherries on the street when she was 6 years old. And she wanted to go over the street to get some new cherry supplies. And the car hit the child and killed the child. And since then, this man is a free man or a prisoner?
Prisoner.
Of whom?
Himself.
What does he think?
It's his fault.
It's his fault.
Oh yes, he thinks a lot. He has a lot of guilt thoughts. And to whom does he also give guilt?
God.
Yeah, he might give, but I think he was a secular person.
To himself.
Yeah, but who did he also ask? Oh,
The driver.
well, the driver, yes, but the wife. You see, that's why his left ear was so affected. Because when you lose something like a precious thing, a child, you think, what could you have done to avoid it? Now tell me, is he in any way, don't answer too fast, is he in any way responsible that his child was killed?
No. Yes. No.
I hope we can all agree he's with nothing responsible. A child with 6 years old can sell cherries on the street. Yes or no?
Yeah.
No. Well, you might think like you want it, but it happened. He has no responsibility. Probably was at work and his wife was at home or whatever happened. I couldn't get into much details. But now, I said to him this. How often do you think on your child? What did he answer?
Every day, every minute.
Every day. Now, would he suspect that that kills him? Would he? No. Because he's in a prison, and I say to him now, look, I just gave him a thought. I said, how did you feel before you had a child? Before the child was born, how did he feel? Good, he had 3 children. But now this child was born. I said, can you not go back to think like you thought before the child existed? Can he?
No.
Why not?
Yes.
He cannot go because he said that's not possible. But is a child, when you have it for 6 years, a gain or a loss?
Okay.
A gain or a loss? Gain. So can you not be thankful for 6 years? But can you? You cannot.
But you want more.
Because you say, that's not
Enough.
right. It's not enough, exactly. So, this man is in bondage because he thinks he lost something personal or impersonal?
Personal.
Personal. That's why he thinks the child is his. He thinks I gave the child something, and he does not see that he never gave the child anything from himself, because he himself is a creature. He took in order to give, but now he thinks differently. He does not see that the child is not his possession. That's why he breaks himself down and destroys himself. What do you think? Did God not pay attention when the child crossed the street? Were the angel not there? Were they there or not? Yes. Can anything happen here on earth without the approval of God?
No.
Okay. So, if God approved it, why would you protest? Because it's his child, isn't it? Who suffers most that the child dies? God, because it's his. But did he not sacrifice his own son? For whose purpose?
Everyone.
For the salvation of others. But you see, sometimes in our life, things are so important that we understand it. And I believe God only allowed that this child should die, that he might save many people through this event. This professor might never think that he needs God, because he's a biology professor. They don't have a spirit. They don't have the need for love. They just live from genes. And now God knocks at his door and says, my son, there's something in you that destroys you, that is a deception of your mind. Would you like to get rid of it? And if the father gets rid of it, and the mother gets rid of it, and the other 3 children get rid of it, how many people lost anything in the end? No one. That's the economy. That's the way God thinketh. You know, we took 6 foster children who the parents left them. Will we judge the parents that they left them? Mother ran away with another man and left the whole 6 children with his father, with their father. Was it wrong?
Yes.
Yes. But was it for the benefit of the children?
Yes.
Yes. It was for my benefit, because we got them. And God knew what he does. So let us never judge the things that are obviously wrong, because God only allows them. Let us think that when he can do something good out of it. And God cannot do anything good out of it. He does not allow it. No matter how that looks like. So that must be our trust, does it? That must be our understanding. So, I could speak a lot. Let's do a whole overview now of the human being, the inner structure of man. We know the body starts with the cortex. We don't need to put all the organs here. The cortex is enough on both sides. Everything is there, the whole body. And above the cortex is our human spirit. Our human spirit is not in the stomach. We have no brain in the stomach, even though some people believe that. We have no thoughts in our stomach. There's only a result of it. We have no thoughts in our physical heart, because some people get sometimes confused when they hear me say the heart. I don't mean the physical heart. That's just a pump. And don't believe those ideas that when you make a heart transplant, the other things like you were thinking before will give the heart. Those are all mystical things which have no ground in any laws of nature and have no foundation. There is only on the cortex level, because the cortex is the outer layer of the human body, and it is the cockpit where the spirit sits. And here he plays the keys of the piano. And he plays it with the consciousness and then the subconsciousness. And he is dependent. And what he has in the consciousness is his will. And we will see maybe in the other lectures how reason and will and conscience and all this work together, as far as I understood it until now. So, the spirit is dependent on spiritual information. He lives by security, but security is a spiritual idea. He lives by righteousness. He lives by love. He needs that, and that comes first to his will, but then it is worked with in his heart, that is, in his subconsciousness. Now, in the heart, we have learned the bottom of the spirit, so to say, is identity. Who am I? And if that there is the truth, that is the good I, the single I that Jesus described there. The next thing in the chain of the heart, after identity, the first and most important thing is trust. The spirit can do nothing without first trusting the information and the one where he takes it from. So he must trust, he must use faith. And so the question that comes, and that's the beginning of the first chain of action is, in whom do I trust? The spirit is like the stomach. He cannot produce its own food. That's why he must get the food inside, and he does that through trust. That's the taking we will see tomorrow night. So he needs a source of orientation. The spirit without a source of orientation has no capacity to exist or to function, because he needs a source of information. And then the next step after trust is motivation. Motivation asks the question, for whom do I do it? For whom do I want to gain or lose? God made us so, since he is unselfish, nothing that he created can do anything for himself. That's why the motivation for whom do I do it must become conscious for us, even though it's in the subconscious. No one can do anything at any time for himself, because the law does not permit it. If you are a channel, you take in order to give. How much water does the bottle take for itself? Nothing. So the spirit takes, he works with it, but he must pass it on. Imagine the stomach would retain some of the food and would say, I keep this. What would happen? We would die. Nothing in this world keeps anything, but it takes, it transforms, and must pass it on. So there is a clear motivation. He was made to love, to work like God. The action God made take in order to give, that's the law of life, that's the law of all laws, the fundamental law. He put gain as the result of the goal of all decision, and if gain is given, how selfish can you be? If gain is given?
You can't.
You can't. It's only selfishness when gain is receiving. And loss is not to give. So when you keep it, Jesus said, when you keep your life, when you want to preserve it, then you lose it. So we must avoid by all means to not pass on what we took. And our decisions are only our decisions, and the yes and no, that we do yes, yes, and no, no into our cortex. So you might go through this again. I just take now the first human being, that was Adam. When Adam was created, he was dependent on the Word of God. He knew his identity. He knew, I am a created being. That's the truth. That's the single I. In whom only did Adam trust?
God.
He could not trust in anyone else than in God, because God was his creator. Did God ask him if he wants to trust him or not?
No.
No, because trust is an automatic thing, like we have to breathe, to eat, and to drink. Yeah? So God never asked his creatures if they want to be dependent on him or not. And Adam trusted his creator automatically, without doubting him. The only source of his orientation was his creation. What was the motivation of Adam? For whom was he made?
God.
So God made him for what purpose?
To reflect his image.
Yes, to give, to serve. And what was it that would be his motivation? He should do work for who?
God.
For God. But what was the object he had to work with? The words. He was to rule the earth. He was to give names to the animals. What does that mean? So he does all things for God's sake. Adam was a servant of God, and God made him not for himself, not for God, but he made him for the earth, and Adam was that link that connected the earth with God. The action was clear. He took in order to give. What was the gain for Adam? It was to give that what he took from God. He should never keep anything. And so his decision was all right and loss could be avoided. Adam was never forced to not trust God. But he fell into that which is unexplainable. If you would be instead of Adam, would you rather believe a creature than the Creator?
No.
You see, there is no reason for Adam to trust his wife. And there is no reason for Eve to trust the serpent. Because if your Creator says something to you, why would you doubt it? There is no reason why Adam and Eve mistrusted God. But there is something that where they were susceptible with, and that was to be more than God made them to be. That's why the devil tempted and said, you will be like God. You will know good and evil. And I compare this sometimes with this idea. What do you think? Were we made to fly first class or second class?
None.
No. Don't take it verbally. Just, were we made for luxury or for no luxury? You see, we were made for first class.
All right.
That's why they can sell first class 5 times more expensive than the cattle class. Now, I would like to fly the first class. I would never be satisfied except with the first class. Because if I would have a choice, where would I go? I would be 2 hours, 3 hours before there. I would be the first at the door of the plane, and I would choose the best place with all the leather and the nice things. You know, just because I was made for this. Now the devil came to Adam and Eve and said, Eve, God put you in the second class. And so he triggered and said, huh? Well, if he made me for the first class, then God has put me in the first class. But now the devil comes and says, you are at a disadvantage. God put you in the second class. That's unfair. That's how he tempted Adam. That's how he tempted Eve, and then Eve tempted Adam. You see, we were made for first class. And if we were made for first class, God put us into first class. But if you doubt that, then you cannot trust God anymore. And so Adam and Eve put his trust in the devil. And so the word of the devil became their orientation. And now something in them changed in the moment Adam ate. Something changed. What changed in his heart? Because his will did not change. It's still the same will that we have today. We want the good. We have all those things that God put in Adam's will are still in our will. They are preserved. But what changed in Adam that he passed us on? There is one thing that changed, and that was, who am I? And if Adam became in the idea that he is now God, then he believed a lie as truth. He got the evil eye. Now, in whom does he now trust? In whom does he trust? If I ask my patients, in whom do you trust? What do they say? Myself. So everyone trusts in himself, but he does not see that as much impossible to trust yourself, because, you know, trust means dependency. God does never need to trust anyone because he knows anything. He never changes. Everything is fixed. But if you think you're God, then you don't need to trust. But so here the confusion, the deception, the deceitfulness of the heart comes in. People think they trust themselves, but in reality, they trust whom? They trust humans. They don't see that they take from humans. They don't see that they are bound to humans. This gentleman who had suffered 8 years or 9 years after the death of his child, to whom was he bound? To whom did he trust? No, you cannot trust yourself. That's a deception. In whom did he trust for his life? In whom? In his daughter. His daughter was his God. That's why he was in prison. He could not make her alive. She passed away. He was in prison to his own daughter because he thought, it's mine, and my life cannot exist without my daughter. That the daughter cannot exist without the parents, that's the truth. But that the parents make themselves dependent on the children, that's deception. So, now what's the motivation of his heart? For whom does he want his daughter back? Pride and selfishness. Everything is for me. Everything must please me. I am in the center. He works for Satan, but he doesn't know it. How is the law now changed? He thinks he gives in order to receive. That's the law of death. Gain is now still the goal of all his decisions, but now gain is receiving. He sits on the throne and he must receive. And loss is when the others do not do him what he needs. And all his decisions are wrong. There is not one decision that comes out of the wrong identity that is right, no matter how it looks. That's why I'm so glad for 1 Corinthians 13. How many negative things are written in 1 Corinthians 13? None. Because there is written, if you have speak with tongues of angels. Is it something wrong to speak with tongues of angels? Yes or no? But you have no love? What happens? It's nothing. If you know all the truth, if you know all, and if you have all power of faith to move the mountains, and you know all the mysteries, and have no love, how much worth is it? Nothing. And if you give your life and your body to be burned, and your wealth or your income to this world, and you do it out of selfishness, how much worth is it? Nothing. So Paul, and the Bible is very clear, motivation is the result of identity and is the result of whom I trust. Because it's a chain of reaction, we will see immediately a little bit later. So everything that comes out of the nature we are born with is sin. Everything. There is not one thing that can come out of this nature that is good. No matter how it looks outside. That's why as long as this nature exists and has us to do it, we will do not one thing right. Are you with me? So, let's see as an overview. We need a source of spiritual things. And our will is that where God made so that we need those things, that we want them. We want love, we want freedom, we want justice. And now in our subconsciousness, we have our identity. It's the first thing, it's the determination thing. Out of it comes trust. Trust is to take. We saw the law of life that says you must take in order to give. Trust is taking. Trust is dependency. Out of it comes motivation. What you take, you must do. Decision-making criteria, gain and loss. You have to give the decision, and your decision is to give. So that's to know how it happens. Yes and no is the result. Now, if I am a created being, then I take from God, and all things I do are correct. You can never do anything wrong trusting God. But if you think you're God, then you take automatically from Lucifer, from people, from animals, and everything you do is wrong. So humanity, by the sin of Adam, was lost. And it must be redeemed. It must be get out of that wrong motivation. Let's see how that looks. If I am God in my heart, then I have expectations of others, including God and myself. Do you have expectation on others? On you and on God? Yes. Do you have claims towards others? They promised me. Do you have them? Including God and myself. What is the gain if you're God? When others fulfill your claims and your expectations. How many wrong expectations do you have? None. You know all of our expectations are good? Because in our will, we want the good. No one wants the wrong. But why do I sit on the throne and think when others do the right, then that's well for me? The loss is when others don't do what they should. That's why people are fixed on their relationships. You know, when I have to talk to patients, I say you must get that spouse out of your mind. Because about whom do they talk all the time? You always talk about your God. You always talk about your life turns around. It's impossible to not do that the same. So you talk about that which is your God. As I said, you must do that out. You know how hard that was? I will share tomorrow my conversion story. For me to not occupy my mind with what my wife does, what the children do, and what the others doing in the church or in the community. You see, I went out to pray, and I was a prisoner praying for others. And I didn't know that I'm wrong, but God worked on my heart, and He helped me and said, you have to do your work in your heart, and then you can do the work with the others. But as long as you want to help others and you are not there, because Jesus says if you don't take your beam out of your eye first, but you know what happens? If your beam is out of your eyes, you don't see the little thing in the eyes of your neighbor, you don't see it anymore. You only see it because you have that big beam. And then you want to help others because you were made to help others, but you don't see it, that you have the bigger problem than the others. So when I do not receive my expectations or my claims, then I am miserable. And I am discontent. I am angry. I am strife. I'm in strife. I want to control. I force. I have stress, anxiety, and all those things. You know, when I was getting nervous, when I took something, now of course I still had some control, thank God, over me. But once I took a glass of honey and it was just smashed on the wall. Why did I do that? Out of love? In control? Because someone did not, what? Fulfill my expectations and went against them. Now thank God I didn't hit to that person. The wall, the poor wall got it. But he could resist it. Once, it was in old days, and we were living in a house with, you call this when you live up in the, and yes, mansarda. Yeah, the penthouse. And I don't know what was the angle, but I just took my foot and I got it into the wall, and there it stuck. I made a hole. It was a gips hole. No, it's still here. So I remember those things. And you see, for so many years, I did not understand that I'm wrong. Because I always thought I'm right. I saw that my expectations are little. You see, when I got married, why did I get married? To love or to be loved? And you know, I considered myself having very poor expectations. You know, I had only 3 expectations from a woman. Did I share it already? I don't think so. Sometimes I don't know. I just wanted a woman to understand me. How many are there on earth that understand men? It's a little thing. I want a woman to listen to me. How many listen? The moment you start talking, they also talk. Yes. And so you must shut down. Who said that? Yes. And then the third thing, it's just a little thing. I want a woman when she wakes up in the morning to smile. Isn't that nice? Life starts with a smile. I was a very humble person. I just had just small expectations. Believe me, I saw that my expectations are just very, very little. Are they? No. There's no woman on earth that can satisfy that. But I was convinced there must be one. Because I thought, it's just a little thing. And so I was living. My first need is harmony. And so harmony I took out from I was the most funny doctor in my hospital. Because I had to do jokes with anyone. I came into the room, I had to joke. Everything with any nurse, when we did surgery, you had to give some joke so that all have laugh. Because I was dependent on laughing. When the children in the morning came to the table and they were just half sleeping, I got nervous and angry. I said, there is morning, we need to be happy. For whom did I want it? Because I lived from them. Was I conscious of it? No, I thought that's the right thing to do. And you know, my expectations are good. They're just wrong. That I want them from others. Because what is the truth? And then you have the disease of the body. If the truth is in your heart, if you are a created being, how many expectations you have of others, including God and myself? How many? None. How many claims do I have towards others, including God and myself? None. What is gain? When I fulfill my duty. And what is loss? When I do not fulfill my duty. And when others are then not like they should be, can I be still content? Can I be still friendly? Can I be still joyous? Can I still have peace and patience and goodness? Can I? Yes. Because they don't owe me anything. There's a lady I just talked recently and she says, you helped me a lot with one sentence. She says, no one owes me anything. And she says, I had a problem with my husband, but I remembered he owes me nothing. And it relieved my soul. And then she has a problem with her daughter, and she doesn't know how things should go with her life, but she remembered, oh, she doesn't owe me anything. And it relieved her by that. The truth will always relieve ourselves. Because our children know that we are just doing it out of selfishness. So, let's see. We would be healthy in the body, our brain would function perfectly, and our liver as well. So, the cause for all the conflict, for all our problem, is one thing. I'm so happy that Solomon, my friend, from whom I learned so much, had only 2 categories of people. You know them? Have you ever read Solomon? He only knew 2 categories of people. He said the reasonable and the unreasonable. The wise one and the mad one. The balanced mind ones and the foolish ones. Now, what does that mean? The reason, the wisdom, the balanced mind has realistic thoughts and actions according to the laws of nature. They only think that what is possible to be achieved. The foolish one have unrealistic thoughts and actions that contradict the law of nature. That means they cannot go through the wall, but they still try it. That's unreasonableness. That's madness. So, the one that are wise, they maintain life and the vital space in nature, and they maintain health. The other destroy the life and the vital space, nature around them, and the result of it is disease. I'm so happy that disease never comes from reason and from wisdom. It cannot. You only can make yourself sick by unreasonableness, by madness. I'm so glad that I can introduce my patients, especially those who are thinkers, you know, who are used to think and have maybe some higher studies, and I talk to them and say, look, and I could not challenge this man with his child, but what did he want? Did he want something that is reasonable or unreasonable when he wanted his daughter to live? Reasonable or unreasonable? Unreasonable, because he cannot make his daughter to live. It's not his life. That what he wants to control is unrealistic and contradict the law of nature. His daughter is an individual that he cannot control and that does not belong to him. You know where it all comes from? It comes from the wrong identity. So the evil is because we think we're God. The good is when we know who we are. So the bottom line, the problem of all things is just identity. Identity determines dependency. If I'm a creature, I know I'm dependent on God. If I am a God, I am spiritually independent. Physically, we all see that we're dependent on nature, but spiritually, we all think we're independent. Can this be true? Can you be spiritually independent? You cannot. If you are a creature, you know that you're dependent on God. So the only reason for all disagreement, quarrels, diseases, and everything we have is the false identity. If this is eliminated from our life, we are again free agent. Because this is the problem in humanity. His belief about himself, out of which you can see all things come. Now, I didn't know this from the beginning, but by God's grace, I prayed often. I go out in nature and said, Lord, you have to help me to see the bottom of sin. There must be a root where all comes out. And I found none than this. And is it for those who know the Bible, is it clear in the Bible that that's our problem? You know, in Ezekiel, when what the Bible says, what was found in Lucifer, what was it that made him? It says, you think you are God. This is his flag, his inheritance in our life. Do you want to keep it? I hate it. I still sometimes play God because I am confused in my heart because I don't see it always. I have good intention, but I see that I play God. So that's our problem. So I want to finish tonight with the cycle to show how everything works in a cycle. I took this picture on the internet. I hope you can understand something, that since God is a circle and everything creates according to his image, everything that functions in his universe is a cycle. Where it starts, it also ends. We saw that in our hearts, we saw that with our cortex. Everything comes from the heart and everything goes back to the heart. Where does the water come from?
Oh, the flower.
Where does the water come from? Where is the water cycle beginning?
Clouds.
Where is it? Where is it? It's the ocean. From the ocean all water comes, and where does it go back?
Between the clouds.
To the ocean it goes back. And how much does it do on all that cycle? Much? Yes. It gives everywhere power to live. It sustains. But it all starts from the ocean and must go back to the ocean. So, when God created the earth, where does the earth start? Where does the life on earth start from? Yes, God made it, but to whom gave He the responsibility? To Adam. Adam was the only link between God's circle and the circle of the earth. So if Adam would cut himself from God, how much of this earth would be involved? The whole world. Every creature that God made must suffer because of whom? Of Adam and of us. That's why we find in Romans that the whole creature groans that it wants to be released from this separation from God. So Adam was to take from God and to give to the animals would take from him and give to the plants, and the plants would take from the animals and give further on, and at the end there would be a fruit, and the fruit would go back to God's circle, and Adam would give back to God that what came out of God as a result. That's the circle of beneficence. That's the circle how things work. Does God need anything from the earth? No. So what goes back here? The praise, the thankfulness for all that comes out of God. Now let's see the circle in our human being. Where do we start? Where does it start? In the spirit or in the body? Where is the button that starts our life? Where is the button that starts our liver and our stomach? Where is the button? Where is the button? The pushing. It must be in the spirit. And we have in the spirit consciousness, will, mind, reason, conscience. And yes, it passes through that. But what determines and where the cycle begins is in identity. Out of identity comes trust. Out of trust comes motivation. Out of motivation comes decision. The decision becomes electricity through yes or no, and that electricity goes into the cortex. From the cortex it goes into the limbic system, and from the limbic system as emotions it comes the first circuit back, the first feedback comes from the limbic system back to the spirit, that he feels if his subconscious thoughts were correct or not. I give you a small story because fear is a small circle, you know that? Fear is the most terrible emotion because it comes from a subconscious thought. Now, most people say fear comes from nothing. It's never possible. You must have a thought before you fear. And I know that when I was 28 years, I became panic attacks. And I was afraid my heart would stop. Whenever I had some small itching in my chest, I got panic, I died. And it happens in the best circumstances. We were doing vacation on an island in Gran Canaria, and we were in a park, we saw nice birds, and suddenly something itched in my chest. And I got the panic. I said, my wife, I die, we must search a doctor. And so we ran to that whole island to find a doctor, and then he put me down, he measured my blood pressure. What did he find? Nothing, but he gave me some pills for anxiety, but I am afraid of pills, so my wife took it. And she should not get the problem. I just, and because I made her stress. Yes, she had to take care of me, and I was thinking I die. I know fear. I know panic attacks, like maybe no one knows it. And it's the most worst feeling that you can have. And so I said 2015, it's December. I think it was beginning of December, November 2015. I boarded a plane here in Atlanta towards Germany. And I like to fly. I enter the plane and I sit down on my nice, I was sitting in the front, nice place. Not first class, but second, but fine. And I get suddenly this feeling, this emotion coming up. And you know it when you once know it. It is fear. And what does it? It increases with the time. And now I know, 2015, I say, I know the circle. There must be a thought that produces it, but I couldn't remember the thought. And so the feeling gets worse, and I say, I have to get rid of it. I must find the thought that makes it. And so I pray to God, and I go back in my mind to see what happened. And when I go back and consider the situations, I go back in my mind and see I come in. When I came into the door to the airplane, the pilot just came out of the plane. You know, they have to go to do something before they fly. And I saw the pilot, was a tall guy, has no hair. And you know what was my first thought when I saw him? Does he look suicidal? You know what happened in 2015? The German airplane got crashed because they say a pilot committed suicide. And he took the whole plane with him. I fly almost every weekend because of this ministry, and so I like to fly. But sometimes when I see if the pilot can fly well, I say maybe this is suicidal, the way he pilots the plane. Yeah? So you have that where? In the back of your mind, because you want to control what? Your life. But in whom do you trust when you want to control your life? Yourself and the pilot. You see, when I remembered my thoughts and I realized that I trusted my life in the hands of the pilot. Is it true that your life is dependent on the pilot when you fly that plane? It is not true. Because the pilot can fly the plane like he wants. It will only land like God wants it. And even if it crashes and God wants to preserve my life, no one can kill me.
Amen.
No one. And in a moment I saw that my life was in the hand of the pilot. I saw the deception. I said, Lord, I trust you, not the pilot. What happened with my panic? The whole emotions went away like nothing. Because I knew the truth. To trust in the pilot. To trust in God. Because every problem that we have, every thought begins with trust. And it comes out of identity, of course, but trust is that active thing to take. Identity is that situation that you are in, but trust comes as a first action, and out of trust, any action of humanity comes from. I am picked up from the airport from some drivers. Is my life ever dependent on the drivers in that car? No, because I'm in God's hands, and I am in God's service, and I say to God, Lord, if the plane crashes, I lose nothing, it's you who loses. So I'm quite safe, am I? Amen. Because it's God's business, not my business. I'm in His business. I do not need to preserve my life. Because I know I only preserve it when I give it to service. So I was once picked up from a man from the airport in Romania. He was a funny guy, I didn't know him. He went through the city with 200 kilometers an hour. That is how many miles an hour? 130 miles an hour through the city. And he brought me then back from another place, and there were two lines, but it was dark. And usually I'm not afraid, but this guy he said, I drive as fast as I can. He was a funny guy. He was driving good, but I said, how many tickets do you get? He said, in 5 years I got for 1,000 euro tickets. But it's worth it. It's worth it because I drive as much as I want. I don't need to keep the laws. I just have nothing to lose because I'd rather pay something than do not have the fun to drive. He has 2 children, and I say, your wife is driving with you sometimes? I understand her. When I had to go back to the airport, I was happy. I think he didn't drive me. But my life can never be dependent on circumstances because God is in control of the circumstances. So the emotions are the first circuit back to us. And when we have a feeling, when we have an emotion, we must know that something has gone out in our mind. And if it's a pressing emotion, then we know that we are doing it out of the wrong identity for sure. But where does it go now from the limbic system after the first circle comes back to emotions? You know that from the limbic system, the next step is the bone marrow, or that what we call immune system. It is just a few years ago when they discovered, they didn't know it until then, obviously, they say they discovered that there are direct lines between the brain and the lymphatic system, that is, not the lymphatic, the system where the blood is made, and the bone marrow is the king of it. You know, Solomon knew the cycle, because he says a merry heart is good like a medicine, makes the blood sugar and everything, and a broken spirit dries up bones. And you know where it goes from the bone marrow? To all the organs. It doesn't matter where it goes to. It goes from the bone marrow to all organs. And I don't know, did I share this example of this lady who got an infection, so to say, on her right eye, and for 5 years she was treated because she has an autoimmune disease. They found in her blood antibodies, specific antibodies, and they treated her. You know where most treatment go against? The bone marrow, because there is none. And so you either do something against the bone marrow, or you, I would say, eat gluten-free or something that is there as a cofactor for that antibody to work. That's why when we got vegan, we can change some things there because we need the proteins and so on for making the antibodies, and we do not give the body anymore, or the bone marrow, the necessary means by which it does it. Of course it cannot do it, but the input still goes there, and then it comes something else instead. Now this lady was treated 5 years against her bone marrow with certain medications to stop the antibodies to attack her right eye. Now the antibodies they found, they go through the blood. Where do the antibodies go? All over. To all organs. And should they not attack all the same tissue that is in the body? Why do they not attack the left eye, since they go through that again also? How does it work? Doctors never ask those questions, you know that? But now she comes to my practice because the antibodies didn't go to the left side of her eye, but now they went to the right vestibular organ and broke it. Now she has severe dizziness. It's also the right side affected, like the right eye. And now, you are now a doctor, I hope so, almost. You know where it comes from. That bone marrow was made only from the input of the right cortex. And those bone marrows, those antibodies were made specially only for the right side. How does that work? Because in the blood, they're all over in the same amount. It goes to all organs. That's why for me, disease is the expression or the multiple expression of one cause. Because we have one body that is there, that is affected. Where it goes, in which organ, I do not care. Which name I give to the disease, I do not care. Because it's from the same place. It always goes like this. You know where food comes in? Food, water, air, only here enters the circle. So you see how much steps already were behind when you start eating and drinking and breathing? So there starts that circle, and of course we could go through it, but now it all comes back to the limbic system, it comes back to the cortex, and from the cortex to the spirit. And if the identity is right, how is the function of the body? All functions are normal. If the identity is wrong, all functions will not be normal. And we'll just live by grace, because we have the wrong identity, and we still live. That's just because God postpones our separation from Him until we get to the point to understand that something in us must change. You know what must be changed in you?
Maybe.
Only identity. If you know who you are, and if you now study the Bible from this perspective, you will see that's always about this. Who am I? See Jesus. I mean, Jesus is my best, revelation, I could say. Jesus says, who am I? I am His first temptation, you know where it was? His first temptation, where was he attacked?
Food.
What did he say? What did the devil said to him?
In the desert.
If you be who?
Like God.
The Son of God. Then turn out of this stones bread. And what was Jesus' answer?
Man shall not live by bread. But every word
So,
that proceedeth.
what was his identity? He says, I am a creature, I'm a man, and I don't live by bread only. But my life comes from the Word of God. And God promised me that He will take care for me, but even if you let me die, I won't do that what I cannot do as a man, to make out of stones bread. Have you ever been in that temptation? Yes. Because you try things that are impossible to you. If Jesus would have tried it, He must have used His divine force that He had to let aside to become a creature. So, if you go through all the things, through all the temptations, through all the things, you will find there are one thing that is there at the bottom line, and there is one thing that is proven. In whom do you trust? Because your identity determines whom you trust. And since it is subconscious, we must make it conscious. And disease and stress and difficulties help us to make it conscious. So, who do you think you are? Who am I? Am I a creature or a created being, or am I God? That's the decisive and ultimate question. If that is solved, every problem is solved. And I think we all know the truth. We are a created being. But in our hearts, we think different. That's why we must learn with reason to go against our hearts, to overcome that makes our life so miserable and leads us to not have good relationship, that leads us to be rulers, that leads us to have suffering and pain, while we could have the best relationship among each other. You see, I saw in those best relationships between mother and daughter, between mother and son, should there ever be a conflict? Between wife and husband, should there ever be a conflict? Should there ever be a dispute who is right?
No.
You know how much evil that brings? How much consequences that brings into the world? I hate it when I find myself fighting. I hate it that I'm still in prison in certain areas. But I thank God that I'm on the way of becoming free.
Amen.
Total free from that deception to believe that someone owes me something or someone needs to satisfy anything to me, or I should judge anyone's things. So any questions for tonight? I can promise you the last night you have no question then.
I got one.
Please. Yes.
Okay.
I think if when Moses asked God who he is or who should I tell the people you are, he said, I am who I am.
Exactly. That's God's identity. He is who he is. And when we are his children, we will be like him, not in power, but in character. Yes, our identity is a child of God. And what it proves is his love. Because his love proves that I take from him and not from him. What we do prove the motivation under the most difficult circumstances, not under sunshine. Under sunshine, everyone is good. But under the most difficult circumstances, humans will prove, like Job, that they have only one trust, and that is in God. Please.
Okay, you said that the spirit evaluates everything in the body, but does it also do the same thing to a person who's wicked?
And the spirit must evaluate in everything. The spirit is not penetratable by information. If you don't open the door to that influence and take it over, it will never happen. You see, Jesus came and he lived into the vilest city of Nazareth. Did it affect him? Was he eating from them? Or he felt it, but he never took it over. And I think that's what we must know. Some people come and say, well, when I enter my office and I see the workers there, there is a negative cloud around it. I see the negativity. He said, don't worry, cut it down. By a smile. Because if you don't take it, we must understand the law. Everything that comes to us comes from a space that is in between us and the other. And if I don't pick it up, it cannot do anything with me. That's why we must learn not to pick up, because we automatically pick up what others say and take it personally because we're gods. Yeah. But if we are becoming wise and understand the law, we only pick that up which comes from God, and so we are free. So responsibility, you see, we have an influence. But I am not responsible if you take the influence or not. I'm just responsible what influence I share. Yeah? And I want to have a good influence, but I'm not responsible if you take it or not. And who will God take more to account? Who takes the influence or who gives it? Who gives it? That's why we must be aware of our influence that we give upon others. Because they might pick it up. And if they pick it up and it comes from God, it is good. But if we have an influence that is not good, and others pick it up, then God will say, why did you have that influence? So the responsibility is higher with the one who gives the influence than the one that picks him up. That's why we must be very aware What am I giving around? You see, I was expecting from my wife when I come home that she should have everything in the house ready. She should be nicely dressed, perfumed, smile. Isn't that nice? Did I expect anything wrong? Yeah. Yeah. This is just what I wanted. That's why I took a woman. Because I wanted someone to give me harmony, to just be there for me, that I should have a source to live, to get from her influence. But if she didn't have it, what did I take from her? I took the other thing. So then I had to change her, that she should always be harmonious. So we live always from taking. And then what we take, we must give. And tomorrow night we will see this law, as it comes in the Ten Commandments, how children get sick. Why in children happens what happens? Because if we know the law, if we know the dependency, everything becomes clear, at least in reason. We might not be able to do it, but at least it's a pleasure to know it.
You mentioned that the body and the breath, and then you became a living soul or spirit. Is that the same spirit you're talking about there?
Yes, we inherit the spirit of Adam, like we inherit Adam's body. We are all of us here are 100% Adam, from Adam. Eve was 100% from Adam. Jesus was only 50% from Adam, but that we will see when we come to the solution. But we all are 100% Adam. I think it's late enough. Let's go home and let's think about the things. I hope you're challenged. I mean, I never had a seminar named the Challenge Seminar. This is the first one that someone names it like that. But I believe it's a true name. It must challenge us. Start thinking and start ruling our spirit out of his lethargy and come to have a basis that is solid and a foundation that will not be moved. Thank you.